Senior Advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you for joining us on I-24 News again. Mark, I want to ask you, there's a lot of excitement in Israel among Israelis about this agreement with Morocco, but I wonder if you could address the sort of wider diplomatic or, let's say, geopolitical implications. We're talking about a very different country from the UAE or Bahrain, has a long history of relations with Israel, but was never quite willing to go and take that next step to full diplomatic relations. So how do you assess the significance?
Well, obviously, it's hugely significant. It's incredibly important. And I'll suggest you think about the following, Calev. Our first two agreements were with countries in the Gulf, with the UAE and with Bahrain. And now we've gone from the eastern tip of the Arab world to the western tip, to the Atlantic shore, to Morocco. And I think it shows us that the peace between Israel and the Arab world, the growing circle of peace, isn't confined to a particular part of the Arab world, but encompasses the Arab world in its entirety. And that's very exciting. And it started with the UAE. It went to Bahrain, to Sudan, now to Morocco, and this is not the end of it. It's going to continue. The circle of peace will continue to expand.
Right. Another difference, Mark, is that Morocco and its rulers have sometimes played sort of diplomatic roles vis-a-vis Israel as mediators. They've also involved themselves in the Palestinian issue. They see a special responsibility, for example, for Jerusalem. We know Mohammed VI, the king, spoke with the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas. Would the government welcome their involvement in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process?
We think that all these new relationships that we've got with the Arab world will ultimately help us to get peace with the Palestinians, because as Israel is accepted by the Arab world, as Israel is seen as a legitimate part of the region, as more and more Arab countries accept Israel and see us no longer as an enemy, but as a partner, a friend, even as an ally, the Palestinians are ultimately an integral part of the Arab world. This has to affect the way they think. And we hope this will help bring about a change in Palestinian positions to acceptance, to moderation, to reconciliation. And so we see all these new relationships with the Arab world as helping us also, in the long term, solve our problems with the Palestinians.
Now, Mark, Israel this weekend also establishing new relations with the quite small, very isolated Asian nation of Bhutan, but a lot of speculation that perhaps the next nation that could follow in diplomatic relations could be an Asian nation. We know that there are reports Vice President Mike Pence may be coming next month. Is Israel perhaps looking now not only in this region, but maybe to Asia to make that next step to normalization of one of the nations there?
Well, I'm afraid I'll have to lead the speculation on what comes next to learned journalists like yourself. I cannot do that in my position, you understand. In fact, if I prematurely mention the name of a specific country, that could undermine the effect of the possibility of moving forward. If you out someone before it's quite done, before the deal is consummated, then that can be negative. So you'll have to respect that I cannot answer that question.
Right. Can I ask you, Mark, if the Israeli government, if the ambassador in Washington, Gilad Erdan, the prime minister, have reached out to the incoming members of the Biden administration that deal with foreign affairs and security policy, especially to dialogue on this critical issue of Iran?
Well, let's be clear. I think it was President Obama during his transition period said that there's only one president at a time. And we're dealing with the Trump administration because he is the president today. What happens after January 20th, of course, it will be a very different show. The Prime Minister spoke to President-elect Biden on the phone, what was it, 3-4 weeks ago? They had a good conversation. The two leaders know each other well for some 4 decades. When Prime Minister Netanyahu was, I think, deputy ambassador in Washington and the President-elect was a senator, they had a relationship then. That's a relationship that they've continued over the years, and I think that will hopefully hold us in good position when President Biden takes up his role.
All right, Mark REGEV, Senior Advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu, thank you for joining us again on I-24 News.
Thank you for having us.